Chok students, welcome to online lecture again. I'm Mr. Kelvin Tan. In this lesson, you'll be learning about the reasons for protectionism. Okay, in your tutorial lessons, your tutor would have gone through with you the tools for protectionism, that is the tariff diagram. Okay, so that topic will address the question on how does a country protect its domestic industries from foreign competition. So in this lesson, we are going to go through the why. Okay, so from the how to the why. What are the reasons that countries give when they decide to protect their own industries? Okay, so these are some of the points: infant industry, unfair trade practices, trade imbalances and unemployment, declining industries, as well as other reasons. So the key is that if you feel that you have to bring these points in your answer, you must be able to explain them well and evaluate them. In essays, you should be able to weigh the relevance and significance of each to come to an overall stand about whether protectionism is justified. The first justification for protectionism is infant industries. The whole idea is the government of a country, right, may want to develop a certain industry for the long run. That means this particular industry does not have a comparative advantage now, but the government feels that it has the potential to develop one in the future. The problem is that while it doesn't have a comparative advantage now, the cost of production may be higher than their trading partners. So if you don't protect it, right, it is unable to achieve the same internal economies of scale that all the other countries that do have a comparative advantage in this. So as of now, it is not ready to face foreign competitors. So what we do is that we give subsidies. Okay, what the government can do is to subsidize the domestic industry whom they feel that might develop a CA in the future, or they may even put protection to stop the foreign import from coming in. By giving them subsidies, right, they are able to charge more competitive prices. If you stop the foreign imports from coming in, the domestic industry has a ready domestic market to capture. Thus, in the long run, when it grows, it can mature and compete globally. So by then, right, once it grow up and develop its comparative advantage, the government would then lift the protection and allow it to spend on its own. The example I like to use is the Malaysian proton car industry. Now, this is a pet project of Dr. Mahathir. When he was a PM many years ago, he instituted this. And recently, right, he became the PM once again under the government of Pakatan Harapan. So once he became the PM again, just about 2 years ago, last year or 2 years ago, he reenacted this proton car. He believed that Malaysia have a potential to develop a world-beating car industry. So here are the counter arguments. When you protect an industry, right, the chances are that you'll become complacent. Okay, there's less competition, so there's no reason why you should grow up. And when you have lack of incentive, when you don't compete with the rest of the world, right, you don't have an incentive to be cost efficient. What happens in the end is that it becomes a permanent infant. It becomes unable to compete globally. How does one identify legitimate infants? It's not a foolproof way. Okay, Mahathir, in my example of a proton car, right, Mahathir sees this car industry as an infant industry, but really, there's no reason why we should trust the PM for it. And it must have a potential CA, which may not happen. Okay, so these are the other examples: alternative energy, electric cars. Next, dumping and currency manipulation. Since we have talked a lot about currency manipulation in previous lessons, I shall focus on dumping for this video lesson. You may have remembered this slide in the previous video, that the idea of dumping is that you are selling the good in the foreign country at a price below your marginal cost of production with the intention to drive out the competitors. So here we are going to explain in greater detail as well as to offer you evaluation. The whole idea is this: because the foreign firms are selling the good in my country at a price below its cost of production, the domestic competitors in that country while the goods are being dumped, they are unfairly victimized. Okay, they cannot compete with the foreign firm because they have to price the good such that they can make profits. So if they are unable to earn profits in the long run, they may close down. Of course, what the domestic firms will argue is that once you allow us to close down because of this unfair competition, you are basically allowing the foreign firm to achieve the monopoly. Once they achieve the monopoly, the fear is that they will then charge a higher price. So even though consumers benefit from dumping in the short run because of the lower prices, in the long run, right, once the domestic competitors are removed, the foreign firm being a monopoly can now charge a higher price. So as a result, because of this, the domestic firms are asking for the government to protect them, imposing minimum price or tariffs to reduce imports and prevent dumping. This is the argument for protectionism based on dumping. Here are the counter arguments. Is it really true? Okay, once you're able to explain clearly the justification for protectionism based on dumping, it's quite easier to poke holes on this argument. First, the idea is that, is it really true that the foreign firms are pricing their good below the cost of production? It could be that the foreign firms simply are more efficient than you, that the country where the foreign firms come from have the comparative advantage, thus allowing them a lower opportunity cost. In reality, right, what the US firm, okay, if say there are some US firms that accuse Chinese firms of dumping goods, the US firms typically do not know the true cost of production that the Chinese firms face. What they often do is that they look at their own cost of production, they use their own cost of production as the benchmark. So from the American firm point of view, if the Chinese firms price the good below my cost of production as an American firm, I will accuse you of dumping. You can see how silly this point is, right? The foreign firms may come from a country with a relative factor and endowment that is more suitable for certain goods. Okay, so you cannot just use your own cost as a benchmark for the foreign firm's cost. And we must understand, like I said, dumping always benefits the domestic consumers in the country where it occurs because the domestic consumers can buy the good at a lower price. Okay, so this is the first counter argument. Now, even if you manage to prove that the foreign firm is indeed pricing the good below its marginal cost of production, hence the foreign firm is really making a loss, you have to also prove that once the foreign firm drives out the domestic firm, can they really behave like a monopoly? What you're going to learn in market structure is this. Even if there's only a single foreign firm in my country, it does not automatically mean that the foreign firm can raise the price. Okay, so the point is this, the market may still be contestable. When there's contestable, right, even if the foreign firm managed to achieve the monopoly in a country, if this foreign firm dare to exploit its monopoly power to raise the price, other firms, that the domestic firm for example, they can immediately come in to undercut that monopoly price. So if the cost of production is 500, okay, if the foreign firm charges a monopoly of $1,000, you have to prove, okay, the domestic firms who is trying to accuse the foreign firm of the dumping must prove that the domestic firm cannot come back in and try to charge a price between 500 to 1,000. So the point is that even if the foreign firm achieves the monopoly, it does not automatically mean that they can charge a monopoly price. The domestic firm must prove that somehow, right, once they are driven out of the market, there are now barriers to entry, right? They will stop them from coming back in. In Chinese, they call it 东山再起. In English, okay, it's about the phoenix rising from the ashes. Once the foreign firm try to behave like monopoly, you have to prove that the domestic firm cannot rise up again like a phoenix. This is very hard to prove. So my conclusion is this. It's very difficult to justify protectionism based on dumping because there are basically two things that the domestic firms must prove. Number one, that the foreign firms are indeed selling below their cost of production, not yours. And the second thing you must prove is that the foreign firms, even if they achieve monopoly, even if they achieve the sole seller in your country, can they really raise the price? And the last point I want to add is this. Certain goods, right, might happen to have positive externalities. For example, solar panels. When you install the solar panel, it's not just you benefit, other people also benefit. So the problem with positive externalities, right, it is under-consumed based on the price, the market price being too high, as you have learned from your year one. So in this case, right, we should welcome the dumping, because the foreign government, if it's true that the foreign governments are indeed subsidizing their firms so that their firms can dump the solar panels in my country, we should welcome it. Okay, they are actually lowering the price for the consumers in my country to achieve the correct consumption of such goods. So this is a point that you can think about when it comes to the case study question 2 of 2015 that your tutor may have gone through in lessons. Okay, so we have talked about dumping. So the next justification for protectionism is based on correcting balance of trade and unemployment. So the whole idea is that if a country runs a large and persistent balance of trade deficit, protectionism is what we call an expenditure switching policy. It aims to induce the domestic consumers to avoid buying imported goods and then switch some of their consumption into buying domestic goods. Okay, so this will help to correct the balance of trade deficit. Therefore, by switching to domestic consumption, C may rise, national income will increase via the multiplier effect. That's the key. The cyclical unemployment will also go down. The counter argument is that such expenditure switching policies, right, tend to lead to retaliation, because ultimately you're trying to improve your balance of trade by making your trading partners' balance of trade worse. So if they were to retaliate, then your balance of trade may not actually improve. The next point is sunset industry. Recall again, one of the key assumptions of when we prove the law of CA is that factors of production are perfectly mobile across industries in the country. So in the reality, that's not true. So when the country has an industry that it doesn't have a CA in, if it were to close down or scale down the industry in order to benefit from trade, the factors of production, the workers that are in that industry will typically suffer from structural unemployment. So they may want to help to minimize this structural unemployment by temporarily protecting these industries, allowing a slow rate of decline. So what happens is that typically, right, countries, when they protect these industries, they will protect it until the workers themselves move on, so that pass away, so that their kids can now find jobs in the other industries where you have a CA in. Of course, the counter argument is that it may delay the restructuring process, because in order to gain from trade, right, think about your law of CA. In order to gain from trade, a country must specialize in this industry where it has a CA in. So by specializing, they have to scale down on those industries that they don't have a CA in. So this will delay the restructuring process and reduce the gains from trade. And of course, once you introduce protectionism, it's very hard to remove it. Okay, this is the final slide. Some other non-economic arguments for protectionism are these: protection of strategic industries, protection against bad, protection to achieve political objectives. So one example I can think of for A is that for us, right, Singapore, okay, in the previous video, I've explained to you why from the law of CA, it makes sense for Singapore to get rainwater from Malaysia and then sell clean drinking water back to Malaysia. Now, the truth is that we expect that in the long run, right, Malaysia may not want to sell water to us. So water, right, is essential to our existence as a country. So because of that, right, we decided to develop our own water producing capability with new water as well as desalinated water, even though it's of a higher cost. So this is because water is a strategic industry. Okay, so this is the end of the lesson. Thank you.